At a peaceful protest, Bassem was shouting at soldiers to halt the tear gas because someone had been seriously hurt. From nowhere, he himself was then hit by a high-velocity tear gas canister. He cried out in pain and tried to stand, but with a crushed chest, he collapsed and then died from his injuries. Bassem was the leader of non-violent resistance in the small Palestinian town of Bil'in. Half of their land was stolen to make way for a nearby illegal Israeli settlement expansion, and each week its Palestinian villagers marched towards Israel's wall to protest the illegal theft. It was in one of those protests, unarmed and not posing any threat, when Israeli soldiers killed him. His case became somewhat well known because the real footage was featured in an Oscar-nominated documentary film. But non-violent resistance of Palestinians is repressed every day, as we can clearly see right now in Gaza, as thousands of Palestinians are marching literally for their lives, for their existence, in non-violent protest at the Great Return March, and are being met with sniper bullets and indiscriminate violence, which of course inevitably incites some violence from some of the protesters. It is known that to violently repress non-violent protest is an illegal act of oppression under international law. But Palestinians are used to this oppression. They have been experiencing it for decades. They are prohibited from protests, assemblies, and vigils. They are prohibited from waving flags and distributing political material. And their attempts to influence public opinion, even poetry, are treated as political incitement and even terrorism. Their peaceful protests are met with tear gas, rubber-coated bullets, live bullets, and concussion grenades, often causing injury and death. Participants then face incursions and night raids intended to intimidate or arrest them. They are then held indefinitely under administrative detention. Foreign peace activists are often blocked from reaching occupied Palestine. This includes academics and medics that are openly critical of Israel's unjust policies. Those who do get through risk physical harm or death. Those who try to non-violently break Israel's naval siege on Gaza, for example, like the Freedom Flotilla in 2010, were detained, beaten, and deported, while their boats' aid and equipment was confiscated. Some were even killed in international waters. The Palestinian Authority's tax revenues are held whenever they step out of line on the world stage. For example, when they sought UN recognition for Palestine or came forward to join the International Criminal Court. Non-violent resistance abroad is even stifled by governments coordinating with Israeli authorities to blacklist and punish local governments, businesses, organizations, or individuals that support the boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel or Israeli products. People often ask, where is the Palestinian Gandhi? Well, hundreds of them have been killed, and thousands are rotting on the inside of Israeli jails. But there are others, and they are everywhere. But they live in fear of harm, jail, exile, or death, and seldom does the mainstream media ever cover them. I ask myself what part of a 10-year inhumane blockade of 2 million people in Gaza, a place half the size of New York or around a quarter the size of London or LA, a place being deprived of basic amenities in the largest ongoing sick experiment of collective punishment, a place where nearly 50% of its population are under 15 years old, where international bodies are saying could become unlivable by 2020 because of the Israeli and Egyptian-aided strangulation. And I ask myself, what part of that could possibly lead Israelis to believe that somehow Palestinians are the only people on planet Earth who should somehow accept this fate quietly? I mean, let's be honest here. When the people of Gaza have been quiet and docile, has anyone raised a finger in Israel's government to really end the blockade? It simply disappears from the agenda, as well as the international agenda. So the hateful and delusionary comments on social media regarding the Great Return March are really quite chilling. And the way mainstream media is presenting the situation is warped. I concluded that because of the painful Jewish past that culminated in the Holocaust, it would be fair to say that a kind of psychological sickness has infected the national consciousness in Israel. There seems to be an inability to reflect honestly about their own behavior towards Palestinians, or even for a second to empathize with their situation, past and current. The understandable resistance of Palestinians to the Zionist theft and conquest of their lands, the blockade of Gaza, and the 50-year illegal occupation of the crumbs of what remains of historic Palestine is experienced by Israelis as unjustified aggression, regardless of whether that resistance is violent or non-violent. I assume it confirms in their mind a painful history that is somehow in their present, that somehow everyone is out to get them. Unless this collective wound in the Jewish psyche, which has resulted in a deep-rooted moral blindness in Israel and with regards to Israel, is healed, then it will continue to prevent many Israelis and Jewish Israel supporters from understanding the very real pain and suffering Palestinians are enduring at the hands of the Zionist enterprise. And it will prevent any real, genuine solution being found, as well as the feeling of anger and hate no doubt building in a people who are brutally oppressed. Sadly, the hardline, racist, pro-settlements, pro-expansionist Israeli government enjoy perpetuating their people's fears, and it serves their agenda. And of course, the most convenient scapegoat is always Hamas. Even more sad are the attempts to silence and ostracize the few pro-justice and empathetic Jewish Israelis and Jewish organizations both inside and outside of Israel by their own communities, when they do have the courage to speak out and join Palestinians in co-resistance. So therein lies the problem. No matter what non-violent resistance Palestinians use to gain their freedom, most Israelis still perceive it as an existential threat, and as a result, Palestinians are usually met with violence and unrelenting oppression by Israel. As such, Palestinians are damned if they do and damned if they don't, which is probably why the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement around the world to put the necessary non-violent pressure on Israel from the outside makes the most sense.